Hello, I'm Terry David Mulligan, and this is Mulligan Stew, the podcast, music, film, food, and wine. We're going to take care of the film fans now, because we're heading into award season, which culminates with the Oscars, of course. Also from Netflix is The Two Popes. It concerns Pope Benedict, born Joseph Ratzinger, who served as Pope from 2005 until 2013, when he resigned due to failing health. Who to follow him? Who was his choice going to be? As it turns out, Jorge Bergoglio became the 266th Pope and chose the papal name of Francis. He was the first ever Jesuit Pope. They didn't see eye to eye. As a matter of fact, they were on opposites for much of their relationship. But they found a way to connect, a common, shared, balanced opinion of each other and the papacy. There's no car chases, but it would make for a great story, wouldn't it? And that's what happened. With the amazing work of director Fernando Meirelles, best known for his work in City of God. And it needed a screenplay. It needed serious dialogue. And Anthony McCarten was the man chosen to do that screenplay. He was on a roll, having just created the screenplay for Bohemian Rhapsody. I mean, this is strong stuff, my friends. We're talking about two popes and changing the world around them and the millions and millions of followers. Or as Anthony McCarten says in this interview, you got two old men in dresses debating God. Just one thing about how this all came together. Netflix had a junket for the press in Los Angeles. We screened the film. And then the next morning, everybody had breakfast in the patio at the Peninsula Hotel. And in walked the director, Fernando Meirelles, the screenwriter, Anthony McCarten, and lo and behold, one of the popes walked in, Sir Anthony Hopkins. They were immediately surrounded by 30, 40 members of the press. But I was the only one with a microphone, so I just kept sticking it in to the group, wedging my way in between arms and legs. And this is the audio that came from those discussions. So the voices you hear are other reporters asking questions of themselves, but I get in a lick or two as well. Enjoy. Approaching us in the garden at the Peninsula Hotel in Los Angeles is Anthony Hopkins.
You get a sense of presence from the genius of Michelangelo. That was all created by some divine power. And he knew it. 1500, in the 1500s. And he used to go and dissect bodies. And there's a neurology. There was a neurologist, an English neurologist, in the Sistine Chapel with his wife. And he looked up and the painting of the Adam and the finger giving life to him. He said, look, in the cloak of God is the brain and the brainstem.
Wow. Oh, wow.
And you can research it. It's on Google. I didn't know who the British neurologist was, but his theory is that, because he would have gone to the stake and burned, but he hid in plain sight that the nature of God is in us. Yeah. And it struck me that because I question things and think with the violence and the horrors of the world, but even in the football game with all that force and violence and competition, that in fact is also divine. Right. That it's in everything. I sound like an evangelist.
It's Sir Anthony Hopkins.
It sounds like, after watching it for the first time, as you said you did last night, I think that you, even somebody who's responsible for the seminal performance in the film, you got different layers of it watching it last night. And it struck you on a level that made you think about what faith and belief, and I was struck, that macro question throughout the movie of, change or compromise, and how never does it come to either of them within their grounded faith that it also could be evolution.
Yes, and I think there's a moment in it which I thought was, and I saw it last night when Jonathan's at the bar and getting a pizza, and the Pope Ratzinger's on television. And the man next to me said he's a Nazi. And John said, no. And that was a moment that I think has captivated and captured the atmosphere we're living today of non-think, where you have immediate opinion and accusation.
Yep.
He's bad, and they're bad, so let's go to war, and we're good, and he's a liar, and
judgment.
Yes, and I think what it is the thing is, we've got to laugh. We have to have a laugh. And I think Ratzinger says to himself, remember, it's a German joke, it's not meant to be funny. And that's an insight. So I'm a German, but I also have a sense of humor, and I'm a conservative, but so tell me more about your Marxism and your socialism. And that, when Kennedy refused to go to war over Cuba, and they wanted him, the hawks behind him said, let's smash Russia. And Kennedy said privately, said, what is it that's making Khrushchev nervous about us? Let's examine that. Let's cool down. And they said, we have rockets all around Russia. So he saved Khrushchev's face. He said, let's talk. Now that's statesmanship. And that's a total example. And Khrushchev has a great sense of humor as well. But they became friends. And when Kennedy was assassinated, Castro was with the French ambassador in Havana. And he said, this is bad. He didn't rejoice. Because these great world leaders, with the Soviet Union or America or Castro, that there's an understanding, a humanitarian understanding, that we must all get together. Because Kennedy wasn't, and I think this is the same with this guy, with Ratzinger, and with that he thinks, well, I don't like this modern approach to everything, and we've all got to build walls. And you think, well, he's not a bad man. He obviously listens. And I think that's what it was.
Did you talk about the audience for this film?
I didn't expect this.
The reason why I asked you about the audience was basically because many of the audience have been grown up with the superheroes, and this is a serious, great script that you're working from. And I'm wondering who is attracted to that these days. This seems to be classic filmmaking. Classic filmmaking.
It is, isn't it?
It is.
It's a great film. I think Meirelles, who's such a what's the word? I'm going to put my who's such a laid-back man, very calm, a little cool, distance, and but he just comes up with these images. But Anthony McCarten is the great writer, and Jonathan was wonderful to work with, and they all are.
All right, excuse us, guys. We have to get him in for breakfast. Sorry.
It's Sir Anthony Hopkins. In conversation with the Broadcast Film Critics Association, in the garden at the Peninsula Hotel, this is a bonus, Anthony McCarten, the writer of Two Popes, the man who gave us Darkest Hour and Bohemian Rhapsody, amongst others, 3-time Academy Award nominee.
Well, it represents the journey I had to undertake, because when you're doing this, and like we just said, they have to be the same weight class.
Yeah.
I naturally aligned with Francis.
Yeah, of course.
But I had to learn to love Benedict.
Right.
And his rebuttals had to be just as powerful as the argument Francis posed.
Right. That's right.
And I had to dream myself into his soul in a way, and say, what does he represent?
Right.
And I started to see something I hadn't seen before.
Yeah.
Which is that if we do look to religion for anything, it's for eternal truths.
Yeah.
It's for the unchanging.
Yeah.
Orthodox tradition.
Yeah.
That's why we go to these old barns.
Right, that's
with crosses in them and so forth.
Right.
And,
for that sense of constancy.
And synagogues, it's in a fastly changing world, they remain the same. And he stands for that.
Yeah.
And I got an appreciation, because I'd been clamoring for change as a Catholic for years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It also brought me back. I was an altar boy when I was a kid.
Oh, you were, yeah.
I was, yeah, and it brought me back to the sense of watching the traditions and the importance of constancy, as we said, but also the sort of the sense of this is how it's done. These are our intellectual rigors, and these are our sort of our moral and spiritual rigors. And to watch somebody like Francis come in and upend that, but still within the system.
Question dogma.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is not tolerated.
Right.
Right. A guy came up to me after a New York screening and said, "You do know this is a Jewish movie, right?" And I said, "Interesting.
Yeah.
Why would you say that?" And he said, "Because in the Jewish tradition, dogma is a sale that's not revered.
Oh.
Rabbis are constantly questioning scripture and so forth.
Interesting.
It's a Talmudic debate, and
Right.
it's ancient. So you don't stand back and just genuflect and make the sign of the cross with it. You question it. So he said this is the most Talmudic movie I've ever seen.
Tell my other question.
Yeah, and a fantastic one. It's so good. Congratulations on it.
Thank you.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to seeing a fourth time. And I really am,
Really?
because you see more in it constantly every time you see it. It's so fantastic.
No, it's a lot going on.
Yeah.
A lot of nuances and subtleties.
Yeah. Hopefully when you're in New York, we'll do a Q&A. I would love to do it.
I'd love to. Yeah. See you, buddy. Okay.
Speaking of a Q&A, Terry Mulligan.
Yeah, hi, Terry.
Canada. Balance. Seems to me that you had to find balance in this.
Yeah.
And you were saying that you leaned towards one character, but asked of yourself to believe in both.
Yeah.
How was that journey for you?
It was a journey. It was, as I was saying to this gentleman, I had to dream myself into the soul of this other man whose opinions I didn't naturally align with. And I began to see a strength in his position and something essential in what he's doing. He stands for orthodoxy and tradition. And in the end, that's what people look to churches for.
Were you a spiritual man before you took this journey?
I wouldn't claim to be spiritual. I would say that I'm curious.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I'm curious about the spiritual realm, the political realm, the personal realm. But to say I'm spiritual would be like to say I have a PhD in something, and I don't. I'm an undergraduate.
Okay.
And I'm carrying a lot of books around, stumbling around campus, trying to find a course.
Just a kid going somewhere.
Just a kid going somewhere. Yeah.
There was certainly a lot of their conversations, or at least a lot of their speeches, were a matter of record.
Yeah.
Where did you take liberties in terms of their dialogue?
Well, the dialogues themselves are a liberty.
Yeah.
So I did as much research on their stated positions, which happened in separate rooms.
And those positions would come in?
I opened two doors and brought them into the same room and put them into dialogue with each other. That's speculative on my part, and that's the interesting artistic challenge that I undertook, and I hope the audience is comfortable with undertaking.
It was Francis, before he was Francis, a matter of record that he wanted a church that was beaten and dusty and of the streets, and not clean and neat and packaged.
Yeah, the Jesuit tradition is very much dedication to the plight of the poor.
Yeah.
It's also an intellectual tradition, so it combines the two. And so the Jesuit missions that he was presiding over in Argentina were ostensibly working in the worst areas, in the barrios of Argentina, which were also hotbeds of Marxist thought, which is why the junta came in and grabbed 30,000 people and disappeared them.
Yeah.
Speaking of the politics of it, I was curious, the moment, hi, I'm Julia Swift, nice to meet you. I was curious about the moment where the priest was confessing about what he knew about the abuse, and I heard from Netflix that it was a director's choice not to actually have the priest confessed, so that we didn't actually hear what he was confessing. We heard the noise.
The writer's choice.
It was?
Don't listen to Netflix.
Okay.
How dare they?
Okay, so was that something you struggled with, or was that something you knew from the beginning?
No,
that
it was
that's
an
not...
artistic decision. I thought
brilliant.
I thought any confession would seem insufficient.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Because the list of mistakes and misdemeanors and crimes are so long that people would feel that that it wasn't sufficient. So I created an empty space in which you could put your rage, your accusations, your frustrations with this institution. And I thought that was a more complete, holistic way of dealing with it, rather than allowing the movie to get mired down in specific details, confessing to one thing. It was more like a universal confession.
Are you getting a sense now, in talking to all of us and answering these questions, how much dialogue this sets off? It sets off an entire life of itself.
Yeah. Well, I think we were all kind of wondering. We've won 5 audience awards in a row, and who knew that a movie like this would win audience awards? There's no car chases. There's no one pulling out a gun and blazing their way through hotel rooms. It's 2 old men in dresses debating God.
Yeah.
But I think it's got something to do with the fact that finally they learn to listen to each other. And that's such a relief and such a message that people are going, oh God, we need that. You know,
There's
we
so
need.
much love
Yeah.
in both in the writing and how you wrote both of their speeches that I think that's what was emotionally connecting to so many people last night.
Yeah.
Did you
It's
hold
very
them to the
tender.
to the written word? Were they allowed to ad lib a bit?
Little bit, but Tony said Anthony Hopkins said 5 months out, he said, at my age, I'm going to learn these lines once.
Yeah.
Don't change them, please.
Yeah.
You know,
Don't change them.
it's a matter of record that Jonathan Pryce is yet to be nominated for an Oscar.
Yeah,
Is this it? Is this the role?
it should be. Yeah, I'm voting for him.
What's been the response from that you've seen from non-Catholics? You mentioned the thing about it being a very Jewish movie, but what for the secular audience? It's not just for Catholics.
No,
either.
the reactions across the board are exactly the same. I've never done a movie where the reactions have been so personal and emotional. We had a screening a couple of days ago, and I kid you not, I almost had to say to everybody who came out of the screening, because they were falling into our arms with tears, they had tears in their eyes, something had happened, then it was like, you can't drive home in this state. Sit down, have a cup of tea. Some people were shaking. Another guy sort of put his arms around me and just said, fucking hell, and embraced me. You know, I was going, wow, what's going on here?
Yeah.
I don't know how you felt about the movie.
I was surprised by the emotion. I thought it would be an intellectual experience, but I was surprised by the emotional impact.
Somebody gave us a quick flippant email that said, "Bring your hankies." I think it was to Marriage Story.
Yeah.
This was the hanky.
This was the,
Yeah.
I was reaching for paper.
Yeah. No.
He is Anthony McCarten. He's the screenwriter of The Two Popes. He also brought The Darkest Hour, the Churchill film, and Bohemian Rhapsody, amongst others.
And you wrote Bohemian Rhapsody, right?
Did we rock you?
I mean, well, I had a few issues, mostly with like putting some things out of order.
You have to editorialize.
Yep.
You have to. Real life is not a good filmmaker. If you just stick to exactly what happened, you run the risk of making a dull movie without a theme. And I always say, just because it didn't happen doesn't mean it's not true. You're pursuing an overall truth, and sometimes you have to reorder some facts. You move the furniture a little bit. You have to. If you don't, you'll often, and you will have seen movies like this, you go, it's completely accurate, but boy was it a lousy movie. You know, it has to work as a film, it has to work as a story. So that's a tough thing. That's the challenge, and you have to be very responsible in the things you change. You should change things that don't matter too much. You know what I mean? Not fundamentals. You can't say that, you know, Napoleon won the Battle of Waterloo. That's absurd. It's not interesting. It's wrong, you know. But small details, people get very worried about tiny little rearrangement of small details, and you go, well, you're not in my position. I have to tell a story that works for millions of people. So you know, it's a tough call.
Speaking of music, how are you doing on the John and Yoko project?
Wonderful, yeah. No, we're gearing up. We're gearing up for that. John's is a voice that we need to hear from, and to revive that voice again, and also do justice to Yoko, who's been sort of horribly maligned, and her gifts as an artist have never been given their due, I don't think.
Where do you pick up the story?
We start in the 60s when Yoko's having her first exhibition in London.
Oh yeah.
And that's when they meet, and he climbs up the ladder with the magnifying glass. So we start there and we go right through. It's a love story. It's about their search for peace, inner and outer.
Have you cast it yet?
Yeah.
Huh? Okay.
Inner search for peace, inner and outer.
Sure.
Yeah.
But that's a couple of years down the road.
Will be, yeah. Probably out in 2021.
He is Anthony McCarten. He's the screenwriter of The Two Popes.
Yeah.
I was going to say, have you gotten any response? I know the Vatican's going to be tight-lipped on it, but have you gotten any response from Francis or Benedict at all?
No. If they do see it, I doubt Benedict will see it.
He probably doesn't have Netflix set up
yet. He's blind in one eye.
Yeah.
He doesn't really have much of an interest.
Sure.
I don't think he watches TV anymore. He's decided not to watch TV. He said it's a waste of time.
Okay.
So I doubt he's going to see it. If Francis sees it, I'd love him to see it. We'll never hear what he thinks of it.
He'll be,
He'll never hear. No. We're not going to get a congratulatory email. He's not really.
There'll be no press release.
No. 5 stars, Pope Francis.
Just put it out there. See
2
what they
thumbs
say.
up.
Now, when you I heard you make the point where you said you got into their souls in the room.
Yeah.
Is that what you had said? You got into Benedict's soul.
Yeah.
How much of you just had the background of like written accounts of what, or did you use what you knew what their own personal dogma was?
Yeah, I just mined all the public records, whether it's newspaper stories, whether it's books, anything online, anything on YouTube. The internet's amazing.
Was the
Vatican archives have files. I had stuff translated from German newspapers about Benedict, and I talked to a lot of people. Anyone who knew him, knew either guy. So,
him trying to get the letter signed, was that as big of a deal, or that's the reason he showed up, right?
Yeah, well, that's historical record that he wrote twice to the Vatican to resign, and these letters were not responded to.
Okay.
And it's my surmise that the reason for that is that Benedict wanted him to stay in the race because he was planning on resigning. And that's interesting because...
Well, they're so different.
They're so different, and to allow someone with opposing views to stay in a race is an interesting...
That's a choice.
And it's a laudable act on Benedict's part.
How do you think it's going to play in Rome?
We're taking it to Rome. We're not playing in the Vatican, but we're putting it in Rome. I think very well. I think it humanizes, two workers, humble workers within this institution who are trying to do the right thing,
and
which the majority are.
And when do you open in Buenos Aires?
When's what?
When do you open in Buenos Aires?
We're going down there too. We're having a big opening in Buenos Aires in 2 weeks. Yeah. So we're looking forward to that.
Any backlash from the Vatican? Like they have seen the movie or something back from them?
The press corps has seen it and they're happy.
They're happy.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, it's very good. It's very good. We weren't wanting, official sanction of this thing. We just wanted to be able to tell the story, and they have not blocked us in any way. And eventually, they cooperated and they supplied. If you've seen the movie, there's documentary footage of the two popes. That's Vatican material, never been released to a feature film before. So they gave us access. So we really appreciate their willingness, because one could easily understand them just going, no, thank you. We've had,
Final question. That is a word about Netflix. In that we've seen 3 films now. We've seen The Irishman, we've seen Marriage Story, and now we've seen The Two Popes. I applaud their money decisions, their guts, their instinct, and what they're doing. Do you think they're changing this business, or is it going back to what we used to appreciate about film?
No, I think they're cineasts. They love good films. And I remember the day I went in there and they just said, tell me your story. And I told them the story that I was imagining and that I'd written as a play. And at the end of it, they said, let's make this movie. Now, that's rare. I had been around the studios the same couple of days previously, and they were interested, but they weren't on a dime saying yes. And that made a difference. So their eagerness, their willingness to give you the resources to go and tell your story. Mm-hmm. A lot of filmmakers are going to drift that way if the studios are not similarly fleet of foot, because they've got Netflix have very open arms and wonderfully deep pockets, and that's a terrifically seductive combination.
Well, I'm sorry, I said last question, but basically, I love the fact that you are, the whole experience of writing is singular. It's you, it's the machine, it's your thoughts, and what you're surrounded by. All of a sudden, once those words get launched, all this happens. All this takes place.
It's a miracle.
That's bloody marvelous.
It's a miracle.
Do you like
every time a miracle?
What do you think of the Netflix release business plan, which is probably the biggest difference between any other studio of a short 3-4 week theatrical run and then onto a streaming service. Do you think that's, first of all, is that good for this movie? Does it play better for this movie? And then what do you think about it as a future?
We're delighted. When we agreed to do it, there was no prospect of a theatrical release at all.
Okay.
I think Roma's changed things. I think Scott Stuber's come in, and Scott Stuber comes from cinema. And so we've been given a really generous 3-week window in 50 nations. So we're opening in 50 countries with this movie.
But that helps you in award season.
It totally does. But it also allows people to see this on the big screen as well. And then, after 3 weeks, this is going into 150 million homes.
Yeah.
Multiply that by the number of inhabitants in any home, and the eyeballs and the people you can touch.
No, I'm sure that this movie will be watched in churches.
Yeah.
People who go to churches. People who are not Christian, and they will be questioning everything.
Yeah.
And one of the things that really got me about your writing, it's how you create these dialogues.
Yeah. You have to just feed into yourself and into your mind and your imagination as much of the real facts as you can, not just the big political positions that they support, but how do they eat their supper? Are they left-handed? What's their favorite drink? What do they do? What do they like sport? Do they not? What music do they like? What are the little things that make us human, that differentiate us, you from you from you? And when you get enough of those, that's when I begin.
When do you think we'll see the play again on stage?
We're trying to put it on in West End in London right now. We're casting it, and then hopefully we get it out and maybe bring it to Broadway. And
is it different? I mean, the dialogue stays the same. The structure would be different, obviously.
It works powerfully in a slightly different way.
Yeah. Thank you for your work.
Thank
you, mate.
Yeah.
Thank you. In the garden at the Peninsula Hotel, Anthony McCarten, the writer of Two Popes, the man who gave us Darkest Hour and Bohemian Rhapsody, amongst others, 3-time Academy Award nominee. This is the Mulligan Stew Podcast. I'm Terry David Mulligan. We're talking about one of the films of the year, The Two Popes, starring Anthony Hopkins and Jonathan Pryce, from the Academy Award-nominated director of City of God, Fernando Meirelles. And that's who we talk to next. We were talking to Anthony about the balance of the film, how to tell the story, tell both sides of the story, and be fair in balance. Did you talk about balance as you were thinking about it?
No, was something that happened in the cutting room. Because if you read the script, parts of the script there are like 8-9 pages of dialogue. So I knew it was going to be a challenge to make it entertaining or cinematic. So the whole challenge for me was make it 8 pages of dialogue feels watchable. And so we shot the whole thing, and then the balance between jokes and deep thoughts was, I think we got it in the cutting room.
Pacing too,
yeah. And we cut a lot of the film. The first cut was 2 hours and 45 minutes.
Okay.
We cut 45 minutes of the film to get the pace. Because there was some moments that were just talking for too long. I loved the dialogues and I loved what they were saying, but for people who was just watching for the first time, it felt too long. So we started cutting. We took very nice chunks of dialogue out.
It's actually fun editing. It is. I love it.
No, I mean, I shoot only to edit. It's the best video game ever. Yeah, it's where you really shape the film.
Yeah.
The end of the film was completely made on the cutting room. 8 or 9 different versions of the ending. So what I'm saying is that the balance we really get in the cutting room.
Wonderful. The casting had to be perfect.
Yeah, my choice for Jonathan was quite obvious. When I signed the film, I needed an actor to play Pope Francis, and I Googled Pope Francis to see his face, which actor would look alike or could feel alike. And there was a lot at that time. Jonathan Pryce was on Game of Thrones, so there was a lot of photos of the Pope and Jonathan side by side. I said, well, this can be an actor, can be our Pope. And I checked Jonathan's work, and I saw an interview with Jonathan being Jonathan. And he was very humble, very funny, he had the same spirit that I feel watching the Pope talking. And so I thought, well, maybe this guy could be in, and I invited him, and he wanted to do it, and here we are.
Of course you did. And Anthony? Was he always good?
Anthony, I had worked with Anthony before, so, it was our first choice for Benedict, and he loved, and he jumped in. So both actors were our first choices. We're happy to.
And Jonathan's never been nominated for an Oscar.
I hope he does it now. He deserves. He was great in The Wife.
Yeah.
I don't understand why he wasn't nominated.
Well,
but this year, I think he has big chances. And as a voter, I'm going to vote for him.
I know it's going to be a blur. Thank you for your
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. In conversation with Sir Anthony Hopkins and the Two Popes screenwriter, Anthony McCarten, the man who wrote the screenplay for Bohemian Rhapsody, and director Fernando Meirelles. The Two Popes. If you get a chance to see it on a big screen, it's a glorious film. It's streaming as well on Netflix. Next week on Mulligan Stew, the podcast, we hope to have a conversation about the amazing documentary For Sama.